Good morning, 5th grade. Today we're going to continue reading in our text, The Birch Bark House. Before we get started, we have a fill-in-the-blank summary. Get ready to fill in the blanks. It is summer. An Omachus, or little frog, is moving from the village of La Pointe on the island of the golden-breasted woodpecker on Lake Superior to her family's summer home, a birch bark house. Omachus helps her grandmother, Nokomis, build a house from birch bark. She listens as Nokomis prays for forgiveness from the bottom of the tree, and watches as she finds the right spot to start, makes the first cuts, and peels the bark in long sheets. For a girl of only 7, Omachus already has many responsibilities and is learning skills needed to help her family survive. Her family includes Day, her father, who is often gone as he works as a trapper, grandmother Nokomis, Mama, beautiful older sister Angeline, annoying younger brother Pinch, and her beloved baby, Niwu. Press pause to write down your answers and play when you're ready for the focus question. Focus question is, how does the author characterize Omachus? What details from the text help us understand who she is and what motivates her? Our vocabulary words for today are namesake, and that is, that has to do with your name or what your name means. You draw a line to this picture that says Luke means who brings light. The next word is tan. When you tan something, you convert an animal skin into leather. And so you have to soak it, and then you also have to scrape it. And hide, that is the skin of the animal. Go ahead and turn the page and get ready to begin reading on page 12. We're going to use our CSPS strategy. And so the family has finished building their house, and now they are getting ready to move in. They're having their first night in their birch bark house. As it grew dark, the family ate makukaks of moose stew and fresh greens and berries, licked their fingers and bowls clean, and at last rolled themselves into warm, fluffy rabbit skin blankets that still smelled of the cedary smoke from their winter cabin. They were glad to be close to the fire, sleeping on soft, grassy earth underneath leafy sky, and best of all, near water. They fell asleep on the peaceful, curious, continual lapping sound of waves. The fresh wind across the big lake blew away the smoke of cooking fires and vanquished the mosquitoes that came out in whining droves that plagued them in town. It was good to sleep where the village dogs didn't bark at night, and where the only sound to disturb their dreams was the pine trees' sifting wind in the lulling roar. Unless, of course, it stormed. The moon went down to a fingernail sliver in the corn pot from the ground. The leaves of the big birch grew big enough to flutter in the wind. And then, one night, the first storm of the summer struck the island and startled everybody from their dreams. The fire was down and red winking eyes when Omachus woke with an uneasy feeling. Something approached. She felt a footstep. Omachus was always one to sleep near Grandma, and now she rolled close. It was a lonely insistence of the sound of the wind, and then everything went still. Far off she heard a huge footstep. There was a long silence. Then another step fell. The earth shook beneath her, vibrated as though she lay on the head of a vast drum. We'll stop right there because we have information about our character and our setting. In box 1, we would write Omachias is awakened in the middle of the night during a thunderstorm, and she is afraid. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the setting. We're going to come back because we are going to keep reading to find a better quote that shows she's afraid. For the setting, we know that it's summer, and this is the first storm of the summer where Omachias lives. So in box 2, we would write, the first storm of the summer occurs on the island where Omachias and her family live. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. We'd write down this quote at the bottom of page 12. And then one night, the first storm of the summer struck the island and startled everybody from their dreams. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. And so at this point, Omachias is describing to us what she's thinking and what she's feeling as the storm is happening. Okay, so she describes it. First, she describes the storm like footsteps. And at the end of this paragraph, she describes it as like a beating drum. Let's keep reading. A drum. She remembered that Grandma had said the island was the drum of the thunder beings. Closer and closer they came, shaking the earth with their footsteps. Omachias' lonely feeling became fright. She hid her face and tried not to think of the balls of witchfire or the hooting of Grandfather Owl. She tried to keep herself from picturing pacuks, the skeletons of little children flying through the woods, or the icy breath of giant wendigos striding over the ground, cracking trees off of every foot crunch. Another step. Another and another fell, and then the wind howled to life. Rain slashed against the tightly sewn walls. The breath of air stirred up the slumbering coals and cast shadows leaping and fighting on the inside of the little birch bark house. The willow poles trembled, bouncing with the force and the gusts of wind. The birch bark scraped and flapped, but it was held with tight stitches. Omachias hid her face as the thunder rolled, smacking onto the lake shore, waking everything and everyone with its quick violence. The storm punished the ground and then passed over, dying off in softer mumbles. The dull thuds of thunder falling in the distance now felt comforting, and before the sounds entirely faded, Omachias was asleep. We'll stop right there because we have a quote for our character. We have a quote at the bottom of page 13 that lets us know that she was afraid during the storm. And in box 1, we would write, Omachias hid her face as thunder rolled, smacking onto the lake shore, waking everything and everyone with its quick violence. Press pause to write down the quote and play when you're ready to keep reading. We're at the middle of page 14. Maning Wane Kaning Island of the golden-breasted woodpecker sparkled innocently after the night of raw thunder and lightning. Omachias woke and immediately began wondering what had the storm done to the trees. What had the waves washed onto the beach? What interesting bits of wood could she use for pretend dolls? What kind of day would it be? Were the little berries on the edge of the path ripe yet? An unpleasant piece of wondering came to her, too. Had her mother finished scraping and tanning that ugly moose hide, or would she have to help her? Oh, she hoped not. How she hoped! There was a saying she hated. Grandma said it all too often. Each animal, she would say, has just enough brains to tan its own hide. Mama tanned the moose hide with the very brains of the moose, and Omachias hated the oozy feel of them on her hands, not to mention the boring, endless scraping and rubbing that went into making a hide soft enough for moccasins. Top of the next page. From the fire at the center of the bark house, a thin curl of smoke rose. then vanished through the crescent moonlight in the roof. If only she could escape with the smoke! She could already hear Mama and Grandma outside at the cooking fires. They were planning the day's work. In no time at all, that soaking moose hide would be stretched on a branch frame, and she would be required to scrape it with the sharpened deer shoulder bone that her mother kept in a bundle of useful things near the door. Her arms would tire. They would feel like falling off. Her fingers would go numb. Her back would hurt. The awful smell would get into her skin. And meanwhile, all the little birds would find the luscious patch of berries she'd alone known about. By the time she got that stupid old moose hide softened up, they would have eaten every last berry. She must act quickly. So we'll stop right there because we have information about Omachias' problem. In box 3, we would write, the next morning, Omachias dreads doing her chores, especially tanning the moose hide. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And for the quote, we would write down this quote at the bottom of page 14. Omachias hated the oozy feel of them on her hands, not to mention the boring, endless scraping and rubbing that went into making a hide soft enough for moccasins. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. We're at the bottom of page 15. The air was fresh and delicious, smelling of new leaves in the woods, just popped out mushrooms, the pelts of young deer. The air flowed in, rain-washed under the strips of birch bark walls she had helped sew together yesterday. Like a small, striped snake, like a salamander, or a squirrel maybe, or a raccoon, something quick, little, harmless, and desperate. She slid, crept, wiggled underneath the sides of the summer house. The seam of the bark caught her on the small of her back, stuck tight. If only she hadn't done such a good job of sewing it up. If only, too, Angeline didn't have such quick ears and sure knowledge of her whereabouts at all times. There was a firm pressure suddenly on the small of her back, still caught on the inside. Her sister's foot. Her sister's gloating voice. Neshame, baby sister! Little frog, don't go jumping off. Then there was her mother rounding the back of the house, on one side of her hair still flowing down unbraided. She glanced in surprise at Omachias, trapped, and then, unable to hide her amusement, a big grin spread over Mama's face. Her admired big sister, her beloved mother, laughing. There was Omachias, laughter from the front and laughter from behind, and suddenly all of last night's thunder in her heart. All right, so we have the solution to Omachias' problem. She tries to escape underneath the house without being noticed, and she gets caught, and her mother and sister laugh at her. In box 4, we would write, Omachias tries to sneak out of the birch bark house, but her sister catches her. Omachias is mad that everyone laughs at her for trying to avoid work. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And for the quote, you could write down what Angeline says in the middle of the page. Neshame, baby sister, little frog, don't go jumping off. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. And for the paragraph, you would write, how does Omachias fit into her family? So what is her role and how does she see herself?